Hello and welcome back to Ponder Policy. In today's video, we're going to be looking at a presidential matchup between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, where the Harris campaign is unable to build momentum around her for the Democratic National Convention in August or the election in 3.5 months. And Harris ultimately finds herself going into Election Day in a similar position as Biden was polling at when he decided to drop out of the race. Now, Harris is seen as a far more progressive candidate than Biden, and in order for her to perform well nationally, she would have to distance herself from a lot of those policy items. Those are more progressive, environmental. She wanted to ban fracking, she mentioned previously, which especially wouldn't play well in states like Pennsylvania. If Harris picks a vice presidential candidate, a running mate that does not do well for her nationally, maybe a Gavin Newsom or more progressive-leaning Democrat, that wouldn't do well for her national numbers. She's already polling roughly 2 points down against Trump in previous polls, and a Democrat has to win the national popular vote by 2.5 to 3 percentage points in order to win the Electoral College. Now, recent polls have shown Harris with a 1-point lead in the best of polls for her, but even that isn't enough to win the election, and a 1-point lead would see Trump sweeping the Rust Belt. Harris also underperforms Biden in states like Georgia in previous hypothetical polls taken. This is before Biden dropped out of the race. But even in states like this, you see Trump +5, Trump +10, and that doesn't bode well for Harris's odds at capturing swing votes. Now, a lot of Democrats were relieved when Biden dropped out of the race, but were disappointed to see Harris as the heir apparent to the Democratic ticket. This is somebody who only gained 844 votes in the Democratic primary for the 2020 election. She has some scandals from her time as a DA in California, and overall her more progressive beliefs may not play well to a national electorate. Democrats, in many ways, wanted Biden to drop out because him at the top of the ticket may lower Democratic turnout and hurt House Democrats in a lot of closer races, especially in New York and other swing districts across the country. And having Harris at the top of the ticket may help congressional Democrats, but ultimately with Republicans heavily favored to take the Senate and sort of still a closer race in the House, I don't think that Harris is going to be able to be the electoral juggernaut that Democrats were kind of hoping for against Donald Trump. Harris, who still has approval rating that's underwater, it's even lower than Donald Trump's is currently, and her approval rating is only a point higher than Joe Biden's. If higher-ups in the Democratic Party don't coalesce around appointing Harris to the DNC and instead are conflicted about having an open primary or just having the delegates already selected vote, that could create a lot of tension within the party where voters see that as an undemocratic process. If the media also, which immediately hasn't been as favorable to Harris as her early fledgling campaign maybe would have liked, is starting to, yes, this is an opinion piece, but is starting to have more mixed reviews about Harris as a potential Democratic nominee. All of that being the case, I do think Harris has a larger pathway to victory than Biden, but still the underdog against the Trump fans' ticket at this moment. Now, Harris is guaranteed to win California by well over 15 points. It's one of the most Democratic states in the country, along with Vermont. People are saying that Illinois could get closer, but the votes out of the Chicago metro area are really hard for Republicans to overcome, so I still have this as a safe state. The Pacific Northwest, I don't see Republicans winning. Democrats can still do double-digit margins within these states, along with Colorado, which between 2016 and 2020 had the largest shift to the left of any state in the union. Hawaii, because of the larger progressive voting bloc that was upset over Biden's handling of the war in Gaza, Hawaii is probably going to shift back to the left with a more progressive candidate. And also New York, which initially was only closer because of low Democratic motivation or turnout, is probably going to be back up over 15 points. This could be high double digits, which would still be closer margins for New York than years previous, but that's still a closer state. Massachusetts, Rhode Island are both going to be safe. Maine's 2nd District, with Biden in the race, might have been a likely state just due to low Democratic turnout, but Harris might be able to motivate some Democrats within the state to be able to turn out, tribe up the statewide numbers, and make Maine as a whole less competitive. This is traditionally a Democratic state where Republicans in the 2nd District gain one of the split electoral votes, but Democrats with a higher turnout in Maine's 1st will probably deny Republicans from being able to take Maine at large, and I have that as a lean state. Although Republicans, depending on turnout in the 1st district, may still have a chance to take Maine as a whole. Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, all going to be likely. No real chance of these going Republican, just being closer states with double-digit margins, maybe even in New Jersey, single-digit margins. Those are going to be the closer states in this Northeast area. And Maryland and D.C., also some of the most Democratic states in the country. No real surprise there. Going over to the Trump column, Montana and his normal base across the center of the country is all going to be pretty effortless for him to win in this election. South Carolina and Alaska are probably going to be over 15 points. Ohio and Iowa may even get up into the high double digits, going close to 15 points. I'm going to put them as likely here, but there is polling out of both of these states that show in the double digits, potentially even over 15 points, with the advance being from Ohio and Iowa shifting to the right even further from 2020. Texas and Florida also both going to be likely states for Trump, and Texas has experienced a shift back to the right from 2020. This was a state that Democrats were hoping to make competitive in 2020, and that ultimately didn't happen. So in 2024, Republicans are probably going to make up their margins, get over 7 points in the state. Florida has been taken off the table as a swing state, and Republicans are set to win it by over 7 points. North Carolina, while I think Harris may be able to outperform Biden within the state, this is a state that I projected would be a likely margin for Trump with Biden on the ticket, and I think the case is still the same with Harris. And Georgia, even with Biden off the ticket and Harris stepping in, despite her potential minority appeal, I don't see Harris winning in Georgia, just given how poorly Harris is polled within the state. And she might even underperform Biden's potential numbers within Georgia. And also in Maine's 2nd district, I think this is going to be likely, potentially even safe, depending on turnout for Republicans. If it's a solid district and the 1st district has lower Democratic turnout, Republicans have a chance at Maine at large, but it's also very hard to take. Going back into the Democratic column, I see New Mexico as being a lean state for Democrats. The Albuquerque suburban Democratic area is just really hard for Republicans to overcome. And while polls showed a very close race between Biden and Trump within the state, even then Democrats were favored within the state, so I don't see that really changing in this scenario. Going back into the Trump column, Arizona and Nevada, in a scenario where Harris is unable to build national momentum, these states are going to be more firmly into the Trump-Vance column, with Nevada if Trump can maximize Republican turnout in the rural counties and do well in Reno and not get absolutely crushed in Las Vegas, where his new policy position to not tax tips may do very well for him there, because Las Vegas has the highest per capita number of tip workers. And going over into Arizona, Republicans, I don't think are going to have this blowout win just because of the abortion referendum in the state at the same time, and I do expect Kari Lake to lose the Senate contest to Ruben Gallego. So despite the split ticketing that is probably going to occur, I do see Trump winning in Arizona. Also, Wisconsin, this is a much more rural state that Republicans can still, especially if Harris does very poorly, win pretty easily by over 2 points. Ron Johnson, the senator from the state, won by 1.2 in 2022, and 2024 in this scenario is going to be a very good national environment for Republicans. Harris, depending on her position on the war in Gaza, may or may not recapture Democratic voters from Dearborn, Michigan, which is a large Arab American suburb of Detroit, and Republicans are still going to be favored in Michigan regardless, even if Harris is able to recapture that area. I do think Republicans are overestimated in Michigan polls, but Trump can still win by over a point. And Pennsylvania, especially if the issue of fracking is hammered through, if you don't pick somebody like Josh Shapiro as your running mate, I do think that Pennsylvania is going to be a lean state for Republicans, where turnout for Democrats is lower in the eastern part of the state, where that issue of fracking and also the Biden administration's policies within the state towards the worker, where issues like fracking are going to have a lot of sway within the state. I do think that Trump can perform very well in the Rust Belt and outperform his margins in 2016. He may also be able to snatch Virginia if Harris is unable to regain momentum in any kind for the Democratic Party. This was a state that in the final days of the Biden campaign, Trump was poised to win, and if Harris is unable to make back those numbers within the state, she may ultimately be able to, but right now, Trump is still potentially favored. New Hampshire is going to be the same thing, where a tilt margin state for Republicans, where in the final days of the Biden campaign, Trump was favored to win just barely, where if Harris goes back into a position like Biden was in, Trump can win the state of New Hampshire, although I do think it would be very close, given that this state voted against Trump in both 2016 and 2020. Minnesota can also get close, but even with Biden on the ballot, he was given the advantage within the state, so I don't see that changing with Harris on the ticket, although this would be a very close state, potentially even under a percentage point. And Nebraska's second, I actually have as a lean state for Democrats, just because the voter turnout for Democrats may be higher in the city of Omaha, which this district is based around. And if that occurs, then it's going to be really hard for Republicans to make a district competitive that was only really competitive with Joe Biden on the ballot. So that's where I think a race stands, where Harris's campaign very much flopped. This is the flip scenario of yesterday's video, where if Harris plays her cards right, she could potentially even win this election, but she could also just as easily fall into the same place as Biden was just days ago, with his polling numbers across the country collapsing against the Trump-Vance ticket. So this is where I could put the 2024 presidential election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And let me know what you think in the comments. Be sure to like the video, and thank you for watching.